Hello everybody, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Welcome to today's Critical Thought. After yesterday's more, sobering and pessimistic topic, we're going to go with something a little lighter today, and that is talking the difference between graphics and aesthetics. But before we get to that, maybe a little hard to see back there, but we're at 679 followers here on YouTube. Thanks so much for subscribing. We actually hit, let me double check that here, we actually hit 680 earlier in the day, but unfortunately lost one. So, I hope you're enjoying the content, and I've come up with a little treat for you folks. If we can hit 700 subscribers, or at this rate we'll hit it soon, but when we do, I'm going to give you guys a little bonus here on the channel. And to make it even better, I'm going to do this for every 100 subscribers we get from now to 1,000, so 800, 900. And if this is popular enough, we'll make this a common thing for every new 100 subscribers here on the channel. So tell your friends and let them know, and we'll see what happens when we get to 700. Before we get to the critical thought, this one's going to be a little bit later, so it gives me a chance to get some administrative stuff out of the way. The first one I want to ask you folks about is sort of the thumbnail design. As you know, I've been slowly but surely trying my hand at Adobe Photoshop, and I think I'm at the point now where I can actually start to make some things. It's not going to be, professional high quality, but it will hopefully look better than what I've been doing. One thing is our little side background thing here. I'm going to try and spruce that up. My first question for you folks is, in terms of the font that I've been using for my thumbnails, do you like it? Would you like to see things change? I personally like that style. I think it gives it a professional look, but I know it's hard to see. So I switched to a fatter font in the meantime while I try and make some things on my own. But let me know in the comments below about that. The second thing that I want to bring up is about Game Wisdom Live. I want to ask you folks, especially for everyone who subscribes here, what do you think about the current time for it, which is 6:30 EST. I've been wanting to get more guests on, especially having a weekly guest. It'll also sort of help double the Perceptive podcast each week. But the challenge, of course, is getting people available for a live show. So I was thinking about changing the time. I want to ask you, the people who have been watching it, what do you think about the current time? Is it good? Would you like to see it later? I don't think I want to do it earlier, because if we go 5:30, I think we run the risk of people actually being around to actually see it live. I would like to at least make it a time where we have a chance of getting an audience, so we get some audience participation going. I was thinking about moving it to like 7:30, maybe even 8 o'clock, but let me know in the comments about that as well. So with all that said, let's get to our actual topic. When we talk about graphics in the theme of this critical thought, I'm referring to fidelity, detail. Basically, what we see in a lot of AAA games, where it's about making things as realistic or as high definition as possible. Some examples would be Doom, Call of Duty, Battlefield, just about a lot of the recent games from Final Fantasy, where it's about making something that looks like it could actually exist in real life. And we could also talk about things like the Transformers movies as well. Aesthetics instead focuses on a unique style or a unique kind of look to the game. It's kind of hard to properly explain, and I am not an artist. I'm sure someone who has a background in art can explain it better. But we can see this in games that are less about a defined or a high-def character setting and more about having something that's stylized. Big example, of course, would be Team Fortress, Mario, the games from Clay Entertainment, Renowned Explorers, and in the AAA market, games like Borderlands and BioShock Infinite. In these games, it's less about graphical fidelity and more about creating something that's striking or unique. And it's another one of those elements that almost becomes AAA versus indie. AAA developers tend to focus on fidelity. They have the most powerful engines. They have the biggest art teams and the biggest art budget. So they're going to go all out to make things as realistic or as high def as they can. While the independent side, they don't have that budget. So instead, they like to leverage the talents of their artists to create something that's visually striking. And there are obvious pros and cons to each. When it comes to graphic fidelity itself, we're talking about things that are hardware pushing. I mean, Doom nearly brought my system to its knees, and I'm sure unless you have the latest tech, you're not going to run that game at ultra graphics anytime soon. And these are the games that really show the power of these engines. They get that wow factor really well, even stuff like Just Cause 3 and a lot of first-person shooters. Now, the expense of focusing on graphics is that it's not, visually striking. And I can give you the perfect example of that. If you look at a lot of the modern Call of Duty games, just looking at their screenshots, it's hard to tell which game belongs to which one in the series. It's where the classic criticism of modern games of just using browns and grays for everything comes into play. These games, they look very detailed, they're very easy on the eyes, but there's nothing that really holds your interest, nothing that's you're going to remember this 5-10 years down the line. And as we said, the other issue, of course, is the hardware limitations. And that's actually a really good point about why we're seeing pushes for graphical fidelity in the last 16 years or so, maybe even less than that. Many games that focus on graphics, especially in the 90s, really don't hold up. Stuff like Resident Evil, even early Zelda games as well. When they're trying to push for realism and the technology simply isn't there, it just makes things look very dated. It's where, the whole, bodies made out of polygons and shapes kind of look came about during the mid-90s, very early thousands. Focusing on aesthetics, however, is a lot more challenging. Now you have to come up with not just a look for your game like with Team Fortress, but something that blends with the gameplay, something that can fit all aspects of your game. And one of the advantages of graphical fidelity is that you're given a foundation in terms of realism. Things don't have to perfectly mesh when you're dealing with, again, that high-def graphics. As long as they're detailed enough, you can get away with having, your standard UI there. But when you're going for aesthetics, everything has to be unified. If it doesn't work, it comes out looking very hokey or half-finished. Another thing about aesthetics is that because you're focusing on this, it puts a lot more of a strain or a lot more work on your art team or your artists, because it's going to be up to them to define the style and have it work in all aspects of your game. And it's a lot more challenging to do that. You're going to have to come up with original designs, original concepts, and figure out how to animate them, how to properly texture them, and it can be in of itself even more work. I'll give you an example. Let's say, for instance, you're designing a mech suit for a character. If we're dealing with a realistic setting, from a creative point of view, you're dealing with the constraints of a human body. You have a pretty good idea of how a mech suit would work in any number of variations, because we can look at ourselves. Everyone is going to have 2 arms, 2 legs, and body, head. But what happens if we want to design a mech suit for a amorphous green blob with no bone structure? His arms are literally tree branches. He has 3 eyes. And just to add even more to it, he has a beak for a mouth. Now, design me a mech suit that would fit that character. It's not so easy to do. And it's why a good artist can really be worth their weight in gold, especially when you're trying to create something unique. My favorite game of last year, Renowned Explorers, had a very visually striking and appealing aesthetic to that game, and we talked about that when I interviewed Adrian from Abbey Games. But creating that aesthetic takes a lot of work, and when you have a team of dozen or dozen plus artists, it can be, or I'm sorry, dozen artists, it's very hard to get everyone on the same page because art, is a very all-encompassing term. There are so many different styles and aesthetics and themes out there, and again, I am not an artist, so I can't go into too much detail about that. But for any artists watching this right now, I'd love to talk to you either on an episode of Game Wisdom Live or a Perceptive Podcast about the work that goes into this kind of aesthetically focused design. Now, another point of focusing on aesthetics is that, much like your gameplay foundation, it's something you need to decide the earlier the better. You don't want to get 3/4 of the way done in your game and say, oh, let's switch to a Cubist style for our game and just redo all of our assets, textures, and UI. That would drive someone crazy. But as we're seeing, especially from the indie space, the focus on aesthetics over graphics has become a very popular and very useful way of selling your game. As we know, video games are a visual medium, and some of the most eye-popping games have just really, it sticks with you looking at a cutscene or the trailer after 5 to 10 seconds. As I said earlier, Clay Entertainment is a really good example of this. All their games feature very striking aesthetics that you see that and you know immediately what that game is. And that is the key point when we're focusing on aesthetics over graphics. When you see a game that has a strong focus on aesthetics, you will immediately recognize that game. You can see any character from Team Fortress and you know who they are. Now, another challenge of aesthetics design, we're going to wrap this up in like the next minute or so, is fitting it to the gameplay. And that's where things can get even trickier. Again, with realism, because we're dealing with realistic characters, it gives a wide berth for the type of game you want to tell. Grand Theft Auto switches between comedy, satire, violence, driving, etc., all within like a span of minutes, and their graphics engine and their style fits that. But when we're dealing with games that are aesthetically striking, they have to fit or you're going to create a contradiction. For instance, if I want to make a brutally violent, super challenging horror stealth game, if I fill that game with characters that look like they belong in a Mario game, it's going to be a conflict. But before any of you say it, I know there's also the opportunity to create something on purpose that is a contradiction or doesn't look right and try to sell it as a unique brand. There was a indie horror game, I think it was House of a Thousand Jump Scares or something like that, that has, it goes from morbidly disturbing violent and then cutesy, cartoony graphics. Now, in my opinion, I am all about aesthetics. I think games with unique and striking visual designs stand the test of time a lot better. Mario is a really good example of that. The Mario games don't focus on high-def graphics. They focus on that cartoon or that fantasy aesthetic. And it helps the Mario games stand and hold up over years. You look at games, well, not so much Super Mario 64, but when you look at Luigi's Mansion or Mario Sunshine, or even Super Mario Galaxy, the graphics are very vibrant, they're striking, and they hold up. The same goes for my little character here, Meta Knight from the Kirby series. Kirby being another Nintendo series that the characters are all visually striking. It's not about high def, it's about creating something that's unique and that's easy on the eyes. And that takes me to one final point I want to get out before we wrap this up. Another challenge of aesthetic design, again, is making sure that it fits how you want your game to appear. You may think having a fluorescent pink background with neon green platforms to jump on is visually unique, and it is, but my eyes are hurting just thinking about staring at that for hours at a time. And again, art is one of those topics we can talk about in any number of ways, and I would love to talk to an artist, especially those who are responsible for very unique or aesthetically striking games, more about their craft. But we're going to wrap things up here. Again, just to recap, when we hit 700 subscribers, I got a little treat planned for you. Let me know about the time for Game Wisdom Live. And if you have any suggestions for like the fonts I've been using or colors or anything like that, let me know, as I'm going to try and build some stuff in the coming days or weeks. So, with all that said, I'm once again Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Thanks for watching today's Critical Thought, and I will catch you all tomorrow with another one. Take care. Thanks for watching the video, everybody. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment, of course, share your friends. It always helps out. Check out game-wisdom.com, where I examine the art and science of games. You can follow me on Twitch and Twitter under GW Bycer for the latest updates of new content. And be sure to check out our Patreon campaign. You can find us on Patreon under Game Wisdom if you would like to donate and help contribute to keeping Game Wisdom going. Your donations can not only give us the monthly funding we need to keep supporting ourselves, but if we can hit some goals, it will mean more great content for you, and there are some nifty little rewards there as well. Thanks again for watching this video, and be sure to tune into the next one real soon.